Hi, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday morning after, it's Thursday the 7th. I am doing a recording for our Andrew Wyeth lesson here, and I had difficulty with both class recordings, it turns out. So even though we had two really great Zoom lessons, they were not recorded well enough for me to send them out to you. So we are going to do our own. I'm going to do my own brand new recording, and we're going to talk about both pictures that were painted, and I'm going to sort of we're just gonna do a lesson again and talk about that. And let me see. We started off, kind of trying to do a little Andrew Wyeth sort of impression, and I want to, make sure that we keep that in mind, right? That was the kind of the premise of the picture today, is that we were going to sort of paint this with this in the spirit of Andrew Wyeth. I've got these images that are, some of his paintings. This is probably a full sheet of watercolor. You can see a lot of dry brush here, just indications of things. Here's a path that he, painted around, so you can find some little distinctions in the roads, in the, just the foot traffic, and I love the scraggly little trees here, the beautiful sky that's actually got a huge bloom in it right back here, right? And those are the things that we're going to try and work with today. So this is my one class where we kind of started to do our own little version of this picture. I'm working from my reference of, it's Bostwick Road, right as you come down on the other side of Greenbush Road. There's a beautiful field, hayfield, and there were great kind of rows of stalks in the snow, the light snow that was put down a couple of days ago. Very hazy day, kind of foggy. And so, it felt like a great project for trying some minimal color here, right? And, how I normally work is, get out a lot of reference. So I always kind of have things to look at. Sorry, we want to kind of put a fox in this picture later. And what we ended up doing was, apologize. I've got some fox reference here, and I will send that along with this video once everything's recorded. Here's the other pictures that we sent out. These were kind of cute, but looking at my picture, I don't really want a fox who's so, either looking at the camera or kind of, cutesy. I want one that kind of matches my picture. So I did a little more research and found these guys where, it looks like they're just headed across a field somewhere. And what we're going to have to do is figure out, it'd be great to paint a big fox, but in this particular, scene that I've got, in order to keep this proportional, I need, foxes are pretty small, right? A small, let's see, dachshund size almost, a little taller. Fluffier in the winter, of course, but not big. So we, if I'm doing a large landscape, this fox is going to be a small element in the picture. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to do the fox later and kind of make sure I've got him in the right area of the picture. You know, one of the other things that we talked about in doing this picture was that, you know, I had suggested that you go out and take some photographs in your neighborhood, find something that's kind of pleasing to the eye, you know, and what I'm talking about when I say that is you want a dynamic image to use. You want a picture that makes your eye travel across the entire page. And these are things that are kind of unconscious, right? But in the Western world, right, we read from left to right. So what happens is, you know, unconsciously when we look at a picture, we see this side of the picture, and our eye goes across to the other side. What happens when you paint something or when you're looking for something that's visually appealing is, you know, what I saw in this picture was, you know, a small line of brush heading in this direction, right? So my eye leads me right over here. And then I've got another line of brush that leads my eye following the line over to this direction. And so what we've got is a little bit of a zigzag that takes your eye kind of through the whole picture. It's a very unconscious thing, and what you know, what you're going for is just this allows you to decide where your focal point is going to be, right? So if we put a fox right here down in the very front, it's going to be one of the first things that you see. You know, if he's way up here, you know, crossing this field over here, it's going to be one of the last things that you see. So it makes a difference as far as placement, where it goes, and also that, you know, changes the narrative, right, of the picture as well, as far as, you know, here my fox is the main subject of the picture. If he's way over here in the background, he's an element in the picture, and it kind of just, he adds sort of to the atmosphere of it. This was another set of photos. Same road, just the other side of the road here. Taken from my car, as usual. But what I also love, right? We've got these zigzags going across the snow here, and just the line of trees also brings your eye back and forth across the picture. In this one, we've got a giant tree right here. It's not giant; this is a regular sized tree, but it actually framed, you know, in taking this photograph, I realized that it kind of frames the picture. It forms a kind of okay, what is she going to say? It forms just a you know, a frame around this little scene here. So without my tree, right, I have kind of a totally different picture, right? It's not the same. You can grab a little piece of paper. Yeah, if we take the tree out, then all of a sudden we've got a nice big vista, right? We see things far away, and there's nothing to kind of anchor us in the present or in the foreground. So having this tree here, right, kind of just your eye still follows this, and then kind of works around the picture. The trees, the branches up here lead your eye sort of back and forth, and you get to kind of spend your time sort of swirling around as you look at this picture. So still, focal points are an interesting thing, because, you know, just by painting you can decide, you know, you can change the focal point in a picture by adding the color, making it darker, making it brighter, adding a few other elements, something like that. You know, if I painted in this little branch down here, almost this would be almost my focal point of my picture. All right, so here was our second painting here, and I just started to get the tree in. What I'm really loving is practicing this technique of you know, showing that there are stalks, there's brush here in the snow, trying to work with getting some texture on here. You could use some crayon, you could use some, you know, masking fluid if you want. The painting is the photo is very white, so I'm kind of going to avoid the masking fluid. I want to try and do a looser picture and really see if I can get the texture without having to add that masking fluid. We'll give it a try. I have found a piece of 300-pound paper, so a third of a sheet maybe here. And so if you haven't worked on this, it's whopping expensive. It's probably $30 a sheet now. You know, and it comes in a full sheet of paper, but it is so heavy. It's almost like cardboard, and so it does not need to be taped down. It's also very forgiving. You can scrub it. I think this is a pretty good texture. It doesn't really look like it's I don't think it's rough per se, but it's it got a nice texture on it. And that's what I need in order to be able to paint some of this brush and do some dry brush work on it. So let's start again by drawing this out. And I am going to be using a B pencil, which is dark enough for you to see, but normally I would not use a B pencil. It's too soft and too dark. You don't want to be erasing any lines because it will ruin the texture of your paper. And I do all my erasing after the fact. At the very end, once I'm all done, you can actually go back through with a white eraser and get off most of your lines. So, because I've got a long, narrow picture this time around, I'm thinking maybe I could try this whole scene here. I'm not going to do the tree. Oh, you guys don't see the tree anyway, so never mind. So this is a kind of a compilation of two views of this road as you sort of go around the curve, and this gives me enough, enough to work with for my picture. So I am going to try and decide where I want my horizon to be. I've already done two of these where my horizon is pretty high up, right? I've got, it's almost 2/3 and 1/3. And the same thing for this guy, right? Almost half and half, little, slightly smaller sky, mostly snow. What I'm thinking this time around, it might be fun to change that and have this be more sky and move my horizon down a little bit further. So let's give that a try. So we're going to start over here. I love this little hill, and what I really want to do is put that in. I'm too high up still. So we're going to draw that down a little further, and then this is going to be my big field over here. So if I start to do this, I'm actually drawing on the side of my pencil, with the side of my pencil, to try and keep this loose. I'm trying to paint loose. All right, so we're going to do a few, maybe a little mountain back there. Almost half and half again, but I'll try and bring this down a little further. We've got our main brand brush, line of brush, which is right here, going kind of right across the page. We've got a couple saplings. Whoop, move that up. I'm not going to have any room to necessarily put that in, although this kind of plowed field over here, although I really like it. So who knows? Maybe we'll put a little bit of it in. Let's see if we can do that. Give it a try. Let's see. What's amazing about this vista is it's easily a couple miles, a mile back here. You can see it's pretty far. It goes back pretty far. It's very hard to tell, to judge the distance that you're looking at here. Now I do have a few paths in the snow, and I know I said I wasn't going to use any masking fluid, but since we haven't tried it yet, maybe we should. And has she got her brushes for masking fluid? You would think. Oh, where are they? Good question. I actually just got a few new ones. I want to use something that's a little flatter. Oh, here they all are. I think I'm rolling them. Okay. Let's give this guy a try. It's my poor long rigger brush. So if here is where I'm trying to get those lines to go across. The problem with masking fluid, right, is it's too perfect. So we really want to drag this across so that we get a little texture on this line. And what I'm trying to show is sort of like maybe some lines of a truck perhaps, or a tractor that's gone through. This is now a little too small to use. Alright, here's a little something. Let's give this guy a try. It's kind of slightly flat. And that's going to allow me to kind of, what I'm doing is sort of moving my hand a little bit. Just trying to get some of that. Oof, that's too much. All right, we've got to get all this masking fluid off later, so let's not go too crazy here. Okay, I'm going to try a few more lines. Right, and I think the rest we're just going to paint in, so let's just see how that goes. We'll try a little of both. All right, so there's our masking fluid. All right, I'm going to let that dry. The only way this is going to show up is if I paint something on top of it. And before I do that, I want to put in my set of trees back here. I'm going to try and show a few more lines of snow. And I'll remind myself there's a couple of little trees here, and then see if we can draw way back here another set of hills. So we're trying to put a lot in, but we also need to simplify, right? We can't, you can put everything in, but it's, it might be easier to, we need to simplify, right? We can't do all of it. You can, and then you've got a photorealistic picture. And that is not kind of what I'm going for. I'm going for Andrew Wyeth, right? No, he doesn't always put everything in. Okay, I think this line doesn't come as far. All right, so I'm, combining those two pictures, putting in the things that I really like, and noticing, that this is going to be a limited amount of color, but it's going to be pretty dramatic because of that. All right. So again, normally I start with the sky, specks of things there, and because we're sort of waiting for this to dry, that might be nice. So let's put in a little bit of the sky here, and I'm going to get a big brush. Your biggest flat, or here's a nice big mop. Let's try a few of them. I've done a couple skies already. I need a little bit of interest in it, so I'm gonna try and do something that's got a little bit of texture in it. All right, we'll stay this way for a little bit. I've got a couple of paints here. We're going to grab some of the blue colors out. Let's see if we can try this over here. Maybe you can see a little bit of my palette while I'm working. Yeah, we got to move the water over. It's always tricky. Right? Still working at the computer here. It's insane. Let's try. I used a few other blues before. I do have this Soda Light, it's called, which I really do like. But I think I'm going to get blue or, you know, often I will put something on the paper and I won't know if I like it or not. I'm also going to need to make up a bunch because I am doing a very big wet sky. All right. So because of that, I'm going to do this first. Now, my paper's not going to buckle, but I do want to, because it's not taped down, I'm not going to paint to the outside edge, which means I'm kind of going to end up with a little bit of a vignetted painting, right? A vignette is something that doesn't really go all the way out to the edges. So let's try that. Sorry, what I want is some nice straight lines where we're going to be able to see the field showing up. You know, I could paint around that bunch of trees. I don't have to. I could paint right through them. Maybe we leave a little bit of this dry. A couple lines of dry paint. We'll see. Okay. So we're trying to just get right down to the mountains there. I should get my paper towels ready. Let's see if we can move this up here. Okay. We've got some Payne's Gray, so that certainly wouldn't hurt. Let's give that a try. Now it's perfect for this. Okay. So where's she gonna start, right? Let's figure out. I'm gonna start like right behind the trees here. And I'm gonna just I'm almost just dropping it in. I have the paper. Oh gosh, and there she just splattered it everywhere. So the paper is wet, which means I have more leeway as far as putting the color on. It's not going to dry on me as I go here, but I got a big area to cover. So let's pick this up. Doing the sky, you always want to be paying attention. I'm going to try and let's paint behind those trees. I don't want to fuss too much, but I'm going to give this a lot of water. And we're going to pick it up and move it around as we're watching it. I'm adding more water to this while it's drying. And if we want something a little painterly, right, maybe we're going to need to leave some of this and stop fussing. Okay, so we've got some paint on here. Oops. These are dripping all over the place, and I am going to pick this up. Right, we know a foggy gray sky has got a lot of atmosphere, right? It's got a lot of moisture in the sky. So, what does that tell you? That tells you should keep a lot of moisture on the paper when you're painting a sky like that, I think. Okay, so let's put a towel over here. Just going to blot that wherever it went that I don't want it to go. I still want a really nice edge there, and I can blot things if I need to. All right, this is still pretty wet. We've got a few little white lines, which I should leave because I always forget to do that. I'm going to pick this up. Now, the thing we want to do is actually start watching this while it's drying. Very important. If you walk away while your picture is halfway dry, you're not necessarily going to notice and be aware of changes that are happening that you can address or fix as it's drying. Okay, I've gone back. I'm getting my mop brush out, and I'm adding a bit more water. I'm trying to thin out my color a little, and I'm trying, let's see what happens. Okay, if I introduce a lot of paint and water, I'm going to end up with a bloom, right? I've just added more water to paper that has already started evaporating. So it's going to move a little, and time, as it starts to get to areas that are slightly drier, it's going to move less. But look, I've almost got something that looks a little like rain forming here. So let's keep that going. If I pick it up and I move it constantly, I may end up with something that is too even, right? Too smooth. So let's just watch this. I'm sorry, notice I say so a lot. So let's try and not do that. I did like the bloom that Andrew Wyeth had in his sky, and I'm wondering if we can somehow add a bloom in here on purpose and see what happens, right? Looks like a little fog there. Pick it up and just move it a little. You can see this bit of this added water here is pushing the paint out of the way. There's more water than paint. It's also drying on me, so I'm getting a hard edge in the sky. And normally that happens and everybody freaks out because a bloom is not something you always want. And it usually happens by accident, right? You put too much water on something that's already started to evaporate and dry. But if you are aware that that's what's happening, that your picture is evaporating, and the reason you're getting a hard edge around things is because you've got a wet section of paper and a drier section of paper. The water won't move any further in that area that's initially started to dry already. Okay, let's take that off. I still have a puddle that I can kind of move around here. It's got paint in it, and I think I want it to sort of stay in a darker section of the sky, which is around here. So what happens is you gotta keep turning this. You need gravity to help you move this water around and get the sky the way you want it. So this is just Payne's Gray today, and we can just keep watching it go. I don't like to blot things because then you're actually taking up the color also. We know watercolor dries so much lighter, so my firm is don't take off any color until you're sure it's too much, because we're going for a sky that we're going to do in one shot, and we want it to be dark enough to make it worthwhile that we spent so much time on it. So let's see. Let's see what happens. Right, this is still moving around. I'm trying to keep the darker area over here in this section of the paper. And we're going to move it all the way down to the top and then all the way back. And as this is happening, it's evaporating and starting to move a tiny bit less each time. Right, so our paint is getting more concentrated. We're losing the water, just like making maple syrup, right? It's evaporating. It doesn't happen as fast with all these LED lights anymore. Used to be you could just hold your picture right up to your light bulb and it would dry it for you. Those were the days, huh? I'm liking this. Here's my tiny little bloom. I'm wondering, this is an experiment, right? We're just trying stuff out. What happens if she introduces another bloom here? So 50-50 shot whether we totally screw this up or it works. We don't know. We don't know until we try it. It's fairly dry here. Let's see. Right, see, there's a way to put a bloom in. You just drop it right on by accidentally putting water over it. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a cloud bank. I'm not happy about those drops of paint or water, but yep, we're gonna have to put a little bit more on. This is where things can get bad, right? Can't go back and fix this per se. I can put a little extra water on, and now I gotta watch it move and dry again. The more I fuss with this, with a paintbrush, the worse it will get, because it wasn't quite dry, so that means my paint will come off if I touch it too much. So we're just trying to get that moving a little bit more. You know, we've got a nice lighter area right there. So now I'm moving back over to my darker section of the sky here. And we're going to just keep pulling that up. Now this is also, if I'm working on a really nice sky, I don't want to go to a hair dryer, because the hair dryer is introducing hot air, sort of blowing things around, so you can actually get a pool of paint happening where you don't want it. And actually, this is one of the most fun things you can do, right? Is sit here, look at your painting, and watch the paint dry. This is one of the main elements of watercolor, is watching the paint dry. So think of it as a meditative process. Take a deep breath, let it out, and just keep watching that sky. Right? It's moving just like a real sky as you're watching things change. Let's see how it dries. Okay, now I feel like maybe I've got enough. I'm just going to grab a paper towel and sort of soak up that lens puddle there. And now maybe we'll let this dry flat for a little bit. Let's see what happens. So we've got some weird bloom going on here. That's just that happened. This is also a fingerprint, right? So all kinds of weird things can happen. I've got a wet paper towel. Right, she said she wasn't going to blot it, and now she's going to blot it. See if we can get a little interest there. A little bit more fog. Okay. So I can't really get too much color off of this because it's really pretty dry. It's starting to dry. It's starting to soak into the fibers of the paper. And once it is totally dry, right, those fibers, because we're on the good paper, sort of lock in to them. And, the next time you paint over a totally dry surface, you don't end up losing what was underneath, right? So the layering can only happen on certain kinds of paper. Some watercolor paper, a lot of artists or student grade paper, the paint just kind of sits right on the surface of the paper, and so if you let that dry and try to add another layer on top, which we often do, it's called glazing. If your paper doesn't soak up the paint, you end up just losing your first layer. It just comes off at the same time when you wet another section. But the arches, right, which is 100% cotton rag, so it's cotton, it's absorbent, and that's what allows the paint to kind of really lock into the fibers of the paper, and once it's dry, you are able to then layer on top of another wash of color, and you can let that one dry. The key is it has to be dry, right? You've got to have it be totally dry in between. Often I will touch the paper if it's still a little cool. It's not dry, that means there's a little water in it still. And it also has to be flat again. So if it's slightly buckled a little bit, that tells you also there's still water in the paper. So when you're painting, right, we spend a lot of time doing the sky, fussing and everything, but it was all still shiny. So when you get to you've fussed and fussed and fussed, and you've stopped, and now you're sort of looking at it, and what you can see on this is it's a little bit shiny in one section, and then the rest has dried pretty well. So this is sort of the point of no return, right? I cannot fuss with this anymore. It's not shiny, which means there's not enough water for me to work the surface without totally messing it up. So I have to wait, right? This is that in-between stage where you don't want to do any more to it. You want to wait and let it dry, and then you can do more later. I do have, right, it's still a little wet over there, but if I get a dry paper towel, it's going to be bad. It's going to take up too much, I think. A wet paper towel is sometimes better than a dry paper towel, because our paper towels are too good. Right, so they're going to take off too much. Okay, and if you see, right, I can still get some off here, over here. Not so much. It's pretty much dry already, and I should not touch that. Okay. Well, let's let that go for a little bit. While that's drying, I can kind of do a little work on my brush stuff in the front. We've had a lot of good luck with some flat brushes for this, because it's really nice and easy to sort of pull this around and have it work very the bristles of the brush really work well as foliage. Okay, so I am mixing up. I'm getting my browns out. Let's clean that off a little bit. It's good to clean your palette off if you've got some colors you don't really want to introduce here. But all you need is a little space. So I am using some yellow ochre, and I've got some really nice burnt sienna here too. I'm going to take my paintbrush, and let's kind of practice this. Let me show you what this. Let's practice with brushes and see which ones are going to give us the texture that we're looking for, because we don't know yet. What I am trying to do is to sort of show the edge of the field, right? That's got a kind of straight edge, and I want to show that we've got some, brush here, some foliage, in the field. So this is a rough paper, I think, and here's my brush, and this is called a dry brush technique, where you sort of drag it across. You can see that this will work pretty well for showing those rows in the field. All right, that's one brush. Here's another one. This is my longer flat. So each brush is going to give me a slightly different look. Right? They all, have a different drag. This one holds a little bit more water. I can also use it on the flat side. And it's because it's longer, it holds more paint, and it will let me drag things across a little bit better. So that's a good one. And, I haven't used this guy very often. This is called a fan brush. They're inexpensive. You can, get one to try out if you'd like. It's not crucial because it is difficult to use well. Right? This is a brush that gives you, a very interesting texture, but it's, cut in such a way that the texture is extremely uniform. I mean, not extremely, but pretty uniform, right? You can see. So this needs to be used, like often I will just use a little bit of it at a time. I don't want to draw foliage that looks identical all the way across. I need foliage that looks, kind of ragged. So I've got to be careful. It's a good idea to kind of turn the fan brush as you're working. Use just a few of the bristles as you go. It's great for showing, say, the field that's kind of been mown or plowed and whatever, cut. Right? I can almost get a straight line of little stalks here. But it's tricky. It's tricky because it's too perfect. It's just like the masking fluid. It's not good. You can try, I'm going to try squishing it. But often I will use it sort of to the side if you turn it a little bit. Let's try on that side here. So if we turn this, right, I'm not going straight using it flat. I'm going to turn it at sort of a 45-degree angle. And that helps a little bit. That helps. It's not quite as perfect that way. So that would be my recommendation is, if you try this, turn it in lots of different directions and see which way you like it the best, or which way, practice, see what kind of textures you can get with it. Right? It's cool, but you just want to make sure when your painting is done that you don't want somebody to come up and say to you, "Oh, looks like you used a fan brush." Right? That's the thing. I like to do things where it's not obvious how it was done. Okay. So here we are, back to our paint. Let's try a little bit of the fan brush. I've got the yellow ochre out here. Clean paper towel, right? So if you're starting a new section, make sure you've got a clean brush, right? Because I often will use the brush to sort of take paint out of my paper. My brush is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we've got a little paint on this fan brush, and I am experimenting with doing a little bit of texture on here. Might work nice on this little section of field that I've been trying to show here. Let's see if I can do it. Let's see what this does. All right, I'm actually going to try. Let's go this direction. Let's see. Yeah, that'll work. It'll kind of give me a sort of a field look. Looks like a plowed field here. Leave that for a second. All right. Now I'm going to come in where I've got some of the masking fluid and give the fan brush a shot. So, yeah, turns out it's working much better than I expected. Okay, just kind of keep it not too even. Nice thing to do. You can also get a little bit of extra color in it as you go. Fan brush is often something you want to do at the end as well, so the fact that I'm doing it first is kind of strange. But few little bits of line in here. All right, something like that. We're just sort of practicing as we go across. Add some more. If you've got short little, spiky things, you want a short line. If you're doing tall grasses, you will make a longer line with this. It's working interesting. I just don't want to do the whole thing. Let's get a few more, and let me turn it, right? I said I was going to turn it 3/4 of the way. It gives me a little bit more regularity. I like that. Just try a little bit here. You can always blot it off if you're not happy. Okay. So the fan brush does not stay together. It splits up, and that's how you get, that's what gives you the little lines of what look like grass. Let's give this brush a try. This is my smaller flat here. Okay, and oops, let's see. What do we want? I'm going to take this. If I've got a lot of paint in my brush, not so much. I'm going to try and just do a line back here. Some snow. I'm going to pull that up. So I've drawn a line, and I'm going to come back, and I am on some rough paper, so you can see that I'm getting some really nice texture back there. I'm going to change the color that I'm using. I don't want to be using the same color the whole time. Let's see if I can move in a little bit and show you what we're doing here. There we go. I liked this little part of my picture that sort of shows a few piles of snow. So by painting, around that, we're gonna see if that works. This is one of my focal lines here, right? This line kind of coming across, bringing our eye back forward, or back to the front of the picture. I want to try and keep this the same length. This is sort of a break in the field. And I'm working just from the line that I put on, going up. All of the rest is just, this is all the white of the paper, right? I haven't put anything on this white paint paper yet. I'm using it just as it's snow. Blot a little bit. I can use the side of this brush also. Right? It's only 1/4 of an inch. But it will give me, I can turn it, I can use some little bits of foliage showing up. You can kind of work with the same technique with just a bunch of different shades of color. Okay. Also down over here, whoops, let's move back a little bit. This is my little area here that's got a little less snow on it. And I am going to sort of just drag this across. Alright, and try and make a little bit of something up here. Just trying to create a little bit of interest in my picture. Right, this is all far away. We are not needing to show a lot of detail, and I haven't put my mountains in or anything like that. I just kind of started with this stuff because we were experimenting with that fan brush and I couldn't resist. So, all right, now we're going to go back. Because your paper is dry, definitely use the texture of the paper to give you some really, interesting little blobs of paint on here. That's what's gonna, we want it to be irregular, so turn your brush, move it around. Let's add a little more. I'm burnt sienna. I'm just kind of drop that in. It's a little wet, so it's moving a bit. I can come over here. Let's see if I can use, oh, it's not dark enough. Let's see if we can add right, this is just a thin particular water out of this. I have a little more control, if not much. Can try and put in a few little lines of a tree, perhaps. We'll see. And we can put some things in front of this. Wait on the trees. Let's do the detail later. Let's try and get a few little more things here. A few little stalks coming up. It's kind of fun. So we are just going to skip around now. And I'm going to try, using this flat. Let's see if I can get a couple lines going down and across the field. Now I need to get smaller with these, right? We're trying to introduce some perspective here. So as I go further back, we're going to have less. Everything's going to get smaller, tiny, tiny, tiny back here. So let's not go too detailed. We're going to better to keep it more interesting in the front, right? Keep the texture and everything going on in the front. And you've got to change. Think about how the perspective and your detail changes as you go further back. So you can try putting, your detail in the front first, and then sort of practice going down and across. The other thing is, right, use your flat brush. Pull it down. Let's see what that does. We've got that masking fluid. We're not going to know what that does until we take it off. And so I put something on it, or it won't show up at all. Okay, there's a little more. This is only going to show up if I paint in between it. So let's do that. Take it off. Here's a wider flat, but I'm also trying to do the same texture. So give me more paint. Pardon me. It is dry, wintry day. Okay, this is interesting. When I painted this other section here earlier, I noticed there's some really pretty little foliage there. Wasn't quite sure what it was until I looked a little more closely and noticed that it is exactly what is out in my field. It's burdock, which is big blobs of those pokey things. So I'm going to come in. They actually add some really interesting shapes to my picture. I don't want it per se to be, a black, so I'm changing my color here. And we can introduce a few that are going to move around because it's wet right there. But let's see if we can just do a few little branches. We're not showing everything. We are just sort of indicating. We'll see. Here's another different brush. Let's see if we can get some other foliage here. Now, you can start from the bottom and kind of draw up. What I have discovered as far as painting little brush is that it's much easier to turn it upside down and just kind of pull your brush, because what you're looking for is you want the littler branches to be at the top and at the ends of things, and pulling down naturally gives you a finer line at the bottom, because the brush has a point to it. So change your colors up, right? Try a little kind of greenish, a little bit of gray in here, right? It's definitely a little gray. So I want you to, look and see, how many colors that you can see in here. It's very subtle. You want to be, putting paint on that is a mix of a couple of things. This is not a, right out of the palette type painting. I think we can definitely add interest by having different kinds of grays and stuff on the paper here. Okay, so let's drag that across. Let's go back and see if we can adjust a little bit of this thing now that it's upside down. I'm going to take a little paint off my brush and see if maybe I can do a little straighter, get it a little darker, a little more noticeable. It's not perfect. I mean, it's not nearly as nice as what I'm actually looking at in the picture, but it's okay. And your eye reads it as a field that's been plowed, or the striations of, as a crop circle, perhaps. Okay, so let's turn that back over. Something that I have noticed in Andrew Wyeth's paintings of his landscapes, we just pulled out the snowy ones because it's sort of what's going on right these days. There's always these broad vistas, right? But there's always a few little elements that are just full of detail. Not super detailed, but things to let your eye sort of sit on and look at, right? We've got a field here. A little bit of the fence shows up. There's some brush back here. There's some little elements of scrub way up at the top. A few little rocks or cows back there. I don't even know what they are. The light on the chimney. Some electric lines, things like that, and just tiny little things that are sort of like interesting to find. And I think the reason I put this little bit of field in here is it sort of reminded me of something that he would do. But I think he would like that area. Okay, so back to our picture here. And maybe that's something I want to do with the other bits of foliage. Maybe we do get a little bit of a sapling there. I don't even remember what's on my brush right now. Okay, let's go. Let's see if we can go all the way back. I do want to take that masking fluid off so I know what I've got here. But I think I need more stuff in the field over in this direction. All right, so let's see. Yeah, there's a few that kind of go across this way. Ooh, I think too much paint. Okay, turn that off. Let's pull it up. No, I really want it a little more pokey than that. So let's see. Yeah. We have to kind of really use the side of the brush if you are trying to get some texture. This is the time when you're kind of, you do bad things to the brush. You push it rather than pull it. And that lets the bristles kind of, push up and do interesting things. Okay. Let's see. It's a little too dry. I'm just going to try and get a few more things here. And I can try turning it in different directions. There's my masking fluid, so let's see if that does anything. Okay, let's try poking a few more up here. bit. I'm going to get smaller and smaller as we go back here. Maybe it's just dragged across. Let's try that. Look at these lines are kind of going in different directions here. We'll wait on that. You know, don't rule out kind of blackish brown, any of that. We're going to get some of those things in too. You know, I know I've told some people this, but I used to have a set of watercolors that were from Russia. They're called Yarka. And they come, you know, in cakes that you unwrap and then put in your palette. And they're very good, you know, artist grade watercolor, very nice, very bright, a lot of them. And my Russian paint watercolor set came with 7 browns. So, you know, normally you don't get that many browns, but it's Russian, so, you know, they see a lot of winter just like we do. So it's a nice concept that, you know, there are lots of choices out there for how to do a winter scene with a lot of interest. Okay, let's have a look here. And, you know, we need to stop, right? You need to stop. You need to look back, see how this is going. I want another line here. Not too much. A line of cut hay going back. Too dark. Pull it off. Look back at your picture as you go. This is helping. This is sort of giving me a little bit of a texture in the field. You know, this is not something that I'm working on a pretty big painting right now, so I won't finish this today. I don't want. I want to take my time. Let's also start adding. Now that my sky is dry, I want to start introducing a background. I'm going to go back to kind of a grayish blue. Noisy palette. Even the little purple I'm looking at. This. I like to paint with, you know, more color than you see. We're working from a photograph, but we're doing a painting, and so, you know, we want to make something that's interesting to the eye, that draws your eye in, that, you know, the colors are interesting, this kind of stuff. And so, even though we're trying to do sort of a natural look here, I want there to be quite a bit of color in it. And color, you know, it takes a while to sort of look and notice things, notice color. You know, the skies are gray around here a lot, but you know, what kind of gray, right? Are they Payne's gray? Are they kind of, you know, a little more bluish gray? Is it purpley gray? So, yeah, really kind of look at things, noticing what the you know, variations in color are going to give you. You know, your paintings are going to have more interest. The more color, even if it's a minimal color, you know, the more you use, the more you vary it. Right, this is sort of a reddish gray back here. And I'm trying to preserve a little bit of white, so we got some white fields back there. Gonna grab some darker paint. Okay, and that's sort of creating another break in the tree line. honestly, I'm just turning my brush around to see, what kind of textures I can get with it. I want this big clump of trees, so let's use what I'm using right now, right? And then we'll darken it or change it later. So I've got the side of the brush here, or just the point of the edge. I'm just trying to do the tops of the trees. Things are not dry. That's okay. I don't want to show a ton of detail. If I can leave a little bit of white, it's too late already, but I'm trying to leave a little. And what we'll do is we'll start to darken that a bit. And that will sort of push those back and make them look a little denser. I could put some green in here. I haven't yet. I don't want to put too much in. I like the, winter look of this. On a dark day with less sun, you see less color in things, but there is a tiny little bit. We know they're evergreens, right? Let's see if we can drop in a little. Just kind of sort of an olivey, kind of greenish brown. And because I've already got this dark paint on here, it's going to hopefully give me a darker green. But this is all wet, and I am just dropping some paint in here while this dries. Because I've got this paint on my brush, I'm going to kind of try it out in a couple other places and see what it looks like. It's kind of neat. I like that. That's far back, and it's working like it looks like some evergreen trees back there. Okay. I can't put any trees in that I want detail on because my little hill here is not dry yet. But let's see if maybe we can try a little bit of brush. No, too much. Let's try a little bit of brushwork here. Put some in. And this is still pretty far away, right? We don't have to do this. We're just putting this in case somebody's looking at this picture for a long time. Stuff that they might notice later. Right. If I try to put a tree in, it's going to bleed. Let's do it anyway. Okay. No, we shouldn't. All right. Far away trees, right? You don't see a whole lot of detail there. So we're working with the dry brush, just slightly dry, and I'm kind of just pushing my brush out to kind of create some nice green looks. They're still too bright, too much color because it's too very muted here. A little more. Just darken them up a little bit. And we're gonna blot them a little bit. Too dark right now. Yeah, we'll see. A little brown. I have a black, the neutral tint, which is a nice gray. But I'm still happy with the brown. The burnt sienna is like magic in this picture. It's such a warm red. Ooh, there was something. That your eye, it really kind of draws your eye. It's a really rich color. So putting that in is going to give me a little, more solidity in some areas. So let's try it here too. I was thinking about trying to do some stalks right here. Actually, it looks like what I'm seeing is there's a little bit of burnt skin at the tops of things here. Maybe cattails. Maybe that's what they are. It's a possibility. field work here. Okay. Now I've got, this is almost right in the middle of my picture. There's something to look at right in the middle, but it's not necessarily a focal point. Let's take a little more. This is the yellow ochre again. I love that this ends right here. So that was exactly kind of what I was going for. Just to have it just end, and I actually just ruined that by pulling it a little further across. So let's see, here's a little bit of water, and I'm going to just scrub this very lightly and then blot it. And I can do that over here too, where I'm going to put that giant blob of paint on. I need to kind of fix that a little bit. Okay. Yeah, so we're starting to build up the surface. This is not still wet over there. If you've got a day with a lot of high humidity, your paint is going to take longer to dry. If you're out in the sun, it's going to dry instantly. So these are also things you need to be aware of of the weather when you're doing watercolor, right? Okay. So what I want to do is this little hill here. There is my hill. I love this giant slope. So it's not a giant slope. It's a nice slope. It's a slope. Get a flat brush, and I liked how. Sorry about the noise from my metal palettes. I liked how this worked, so let's try it again. I'm gonna put in a few trunks here. What I'm really concerned about is just the straight across slope of the snow, and I want that nice and sharp. So I'm now gonna just pull this up a little bit, try to get the tops of some things, kind of keep turning my brush, seeing how I can get it nice and pointy, and then I'm gonna just start kind of filling things in here. Well, can she leave any white? No. Okay, this is wet. I'm gonna leave that for a second. I'm gonna switch to a flatter, smaller flat. And I'm gonna grab something else. This is a little bit of darker brown, a little sepia or burnt umber, whatever you've got. And we're going to just add that also. Now, it's very wet, right? I'm putting on a very wet line, so it's kind of hard to get the edge of the trees right. Bells and whistles around here. Okay. So we're working this sort of as one giant section of color almost. Yeah, you keep putting those trees on, and the taller they get, the more they got to get smaller at the top. That seems to be a rule. The trees are always smaller at the top, always narrower. Okay. So we're just working this as like a lumpy section of paint here. Bring it a little further out. Trying not to do a ton of detail, or any detail. But what I am going for is I'm trying to get some really interesting colors here that are going to dry. Whoa. Hopefully look interesting. Now, these trees, all the branches go up. They're not going down. So that's an interesting thing, right? The more you notice, the more accurate or realistic you're going to be able to paint. Okay. Yeah, so we've got some brown and green and darker blue in that. That's I'll try and take a picture of that later. So it's looking really nice. Here's a little bit of water. I'm kind of introducing it to sort of mix around a little bit more. I'm going to try and keep those little white edges, and I can't. Okay, let's see. Nope, I'm going to take that off. I'm looking for a brush. Let's see if we can pull something out on the edge here. This is drying. I think we've got, yeah, there's a couple other trees. I want to see if we can put a little tree in here. We need just a little bit of water. What I'm actually trying to do is use the color from the trees here. I'm just sort of pulling that across. Give us a few bits of interest over here. And because I'm just pulling this paint over, I've got lots of interesting colors happening in that. Okay, and as we come down here, we have a little pocket, and then there's another. We're going to try and create another field back here. Let's see. Yeah. Pull another line across. You don't have to show much to have it look like there's quite a bit going on back there. From a few other breaks of trees. Scrub back here. This is something you could work on forever, or at least a long afternoon, right? And then take a break, look at it again tomorrow. Add some more things. I'm going to make it a little browner over here. Just sort of drop that in and let the color move around. Leave it. I'm liking the brown, which is making me want to add some over to this section here as well. So even though this is not wet, I'm going to put on a bit of brown and add the water, and it's going to look like I put it on at the same time. Okay. Fun. Yeah. How do I refer this? Let's try taking a little of the masking fluid off. Cement pickup, right? We've got this thing that's a little piece of crepe, like a kneaded eraser. So if we haven't talked about the masking fluid, I know that we have for many people, but this is called drawing gum. That's the brand Pebo, something like that. You can get it online. Apparently you can get it at Michael's as well. So it's a liquid. You use not a good brush. You need to use a crummy brush. Just realized that sound. There. Oops. And paint it on. You use soapy water to clean your brush off with, because it sort of sticks into it like rubber cement. If I take this off and I like it, and I can put more on, right? But this is a piece of crepe. It's called a rubber cement pickup. So you can do this with your finger. It just sort of rubs off like rubber cement, but this is much easier if you can find a little piece of this. They used to have it at office supply places when they sold rubber cement. So let's see what this does. Yeah, the texture's worked. It's kind of giving us a little something here. I might very well put it on again. You don't want to leave it on too long. We've had good luck with this particular brand in that you can leave it on for almost 2 weeks but after 2 weeks, it starts to turn into some other, its chemical form changes, and it just becomes part of the paper. You can't get it off. So don't forget to take it off before too long. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to scrub that off a bit. And you can see it did work quite a bit. The other option was crayon, which is what I used on some of the other pictures here. This has got a little bit of crayon on it, and you can see it works virtually just as well for texture, but the crayon doesn't come off. This is white crayon. You can get a clear crayon or a candle, but the wax, once you put it on, you're stuck with it. You're not able to get it off. So that's why the masking fluid is such a great invention. This guy, I did my crayon after I had drawn my lines in that really, really dark pencil, and so my crayon lines turned a little bit of gray. So that's on there. I can't get that off. I could come back with a little bit of white possibly, but I'm happy. I'm happy enough with how that came out. And actually, now that that's dried and I'm looking at it again, what's nice is you can sort of, because we get to do this more than once, I have a couple different versions of things, and I thought this one was done, but now that I'm looking at it again, I want to go back in and see if we can introduce a little bit more color here. So here's a little more yellow ochre. I know this one, you'll see I have the crayon, so actually I shouldn't worry so much about trying to, about the texture, because the crayon's on there and it's going to give me the texture I want anyway. Okay, I like the warmness of the yellow ochre, so I'm coming back in, right? It's cold out there. I mean, it's not really cold, but I want something to warm my picture up and give it a little more interest. So we're still dealing with a fairly monochromatic picture here, but I've got to make it more interesting than my photo, right? So let's see. I'll just try a bit. That's where the tractor turns around, right? Something like that. This is still all just the white of the paper. I loved being able to do this little break in the line of the brush. It was very fun. I think that's kind of a nice, important element there. So, working from your, photo, whatever you have, examine things. See how accurate you can be as far as, showing natural elements that maybe, unless you're really observing, you don't see, right? You don't notice. Let's see here. Too much. Right? Put it on, we take it off. Put it on, take it off. I'm still going for a little bit. I want something in the front here. Big stalks. This might be a time to go to back to the fan brush. Let's give it a try. Turn it a little bit. Okay. I could probably give myself another row. Paint here. So I barely put anything down, hardly showed up, but there we go. Yeah, so I'm able to create something behind it here. Out. We'll see. It's looking a little more like a road, so unfortunately, because of my gray pencil line and the crayon, lost a little of our white. So let's see here's if we're trying to get rid of some things. Let's see if we can. I'm just using some water here. I'm going to try and blot some of that color off. Yeah, worked a little bit. It's okay. Leave it. So, you know, every time you do something, it turns out a little bit different. And hopefully, you know, the more you paint something, the better it gets. It's not always the case, but you know, try things more than once. It's a very good way to you know, develop a technique, develop a color palette. You know, it's a way to practice, right? The same thing. Maybe you do it in a couple of different ways. I am not particularly an abstract painter, and I use, you know, lots of water and washes in a sort of a limited areas. There are many people who paint in a, you know, really abstract landscape way with watercolor, which is a lovely thing. You got to use a big brush, and you got to just let it happen, right? Let it dry and let it happen, and let colors mix on the paper. And we'll see if we can try a little bit of that. It's hard for me to do as well. I can do it in little elements, but anyway. I want to add a few more darker trees to this, and I'm going to keep going at some point. But I love what's happened here is that, you know, we've created this front edge, which is the field that, you know, the viewer is kind of standing on. We've got, right, so your eye is going to go here. We're going to look at some trees and a little foliage over in this area. Then your eye is going to go back over. We've got almost a, like a hill, plane of, you know, further down, kind of going up and over to the next vista over here. So we've created a few different planes of, field just by showing a few tiny bits of line work. We'll see. I think I might want another line of trees back there. Let's see what happens. Here's my view here. I really like a few of these little trees. Now that the leaves have been off everything for a while, and we've been painting trees and snow and all this stuff, I've spent a lot of time noticing tree trunks and branches, things that I hadn't noticed before. Very interesting to see the different ways that all these trees grow, right? You don't see when the leaves are on that each species of tree, the branches grow in a totally different way. You know, you could very obviously be able to tell what kind of tree just by the nature of the branches that are growing, and that's something to, you know, notice, right? Just notice. The more you notice, the more you can paint. So that's my encouragement for today. I'm taking lots of photos of silhouetted trees outside. So anyway, I think this was a good lesson, and we will get to the fox, but I think at this point I'll send you some fox pictures, but I just want to get you something for you to work with. So thank you very much, and we'll get together again soon. Okay, bye.